The key landed beside Mara Ellis's coffee with a small plastic click, and for a second neither woman said anything. It was an ordinary storage key on a faded white tag. Someone had written 318 in black marker, then traced over the numbers when the ink began to wear away.
What's this?
Daniel mailed it to me in March.
Mara looked at Ruth, then at the key again. March had been 7 months before Daniel died and nearly 8 months before Ruth Carver stood in Mara's dining room for the first private conversation they had ever had.
He mailed you a storage key.
Yes.
And you waited until after the memorial to tell me.
I waited until people stopped bringing you casseroles and asking what they could do when neither of you had anything left for them to do.
That answer irritated Mara, partly because it was accurate. 3 foil pans still occupied the bottom shelf of her refrigerator, each labeled in someone else's handwriting. The dining table was covered with the less ceremonial remains of a marriage. Insurance envelopes, pharmacy receipts, camera batteries, an unopened utility bill, and a rubber-banded stack of Daniel's loyalty cards. At 71, after 4 decades photographing weddings, Mara knew how much meaning people could force onto an object after the fact. She had spent her career making rings, shoes, napkins, and half-empty champagne glasses look important because someone had decided the day mattered. She did not want to do that with the key. The problem was that Ruth had brought it into the house like an answer to a question Mara had never known to ask.
What did he say was in there?
He didn't.
He mailed you a key and didn't tell you what it opened?
He told me it was a storage unit. He told me that if he couldn't close it himself, I was supposed to contact you.
Mara's hand stopped on a bank statement she had already read twice. Ruth's wording bothered her more than the key had.
If he couldn't close it himself?
That's what he wrote.
Ruth reached into her purse and placed a folded sheet of paper on the table, but kept 2 fingers resting on it.
Before you decide this proves whatever you're already thinking, read what he actually wrote.
Mara almost told her to leave. Instead, she pulled the paper across the table. Daniel's note was short. Ruth, I'm sending you the duplicate for Unit 318. If I don't take care of it, please make sure Mara gets it. Don't open it unless you have to. There was no explanation beneath those lines. No apology. No greeting beyond Ruth's name. Just Daniel's familiar blocky signature at the bottom.
Why you?
I don't know.
You expect me to believe that?
I expect you to believe I'm 73 years old and too tired to invent secret errands for my ex-husband.
For the first time since Ruth arrived, Mara almost smiled. It disappeared before it became one. Ruth asked for water, and Mara led her into the kitchen without knowing why she bothered. The 2 rooms opened into each other. Nothing had changed except the need to move. Daniel's reading glasses were still on the windowsill above the sink. Mara had wiped around them twice that week without touching them.
How often were you talking to him?
Not often.
That's not an answer.
A few times a year, sometimes less. Usually practical things.
What practical things?
Tax paperwork from something we closed years ago, an old beneficiary form, a question about a box of family photographs, things people don't realize divorce leaves behind.
Mara filled 2 glasses. She wanted Ruth's answer to sound obviously false. Instead, it sounded exactly like the kind of boring administrative debris Daniel hated dealing with.
He never mentioned any of that.
Maybe he didn't think a 10-minute call about an old form was worth reporting to you.
And the key?
The key was different.
Ruth drank half the water in one swallow and set the glass down near the edge of the counter. Her wedding ring had been replaced long ago by a simple silver band on the other hand.
I asked him why he couldn't give the duplicate to you. He said it was complicated.
Complicated.
That's the word he used.
Mara turned toward the sink. Outside, Daniel's car was still parked beside hers because she had not decided whether selling it counted as sensible or disloyal.
We were married 24 years.
I know.
He didn't disappear on weekends. He didn't keep a second phone. We had one checking account. I knew where he went for groceries.
Mara, I am not telling you he had another life.
You don't know what's in there.
Neither do you.
The sentence hung between them because it applied to more than the storage unit, and both women seemed aware enough not to say so. Ruth returned to the dining table and began gathering her purse. Mara thought she was leaving until Ruth picked up an envelope that had been hiding under Daniel's note.
This came to my house yesterday.
The return address belonged to a storage facility on the industrial edge of town. Daniel had apparently listed Ruth as an alternate contact.
Of course he did.
The notice was not dramatic. That made it worse. The monthly payment had failed after Daniel's account was frozen, and the unit would need to be cleared or renewed before additional fees began.
You can renew it if you want. You can empty it. But doing nothing is about to start costing you money.
Me?
You're his wife. Whatever is in there, I'm not paying for it.
Mara read the amount twice. $49 for another month. It was small enough to waste without thinking, and large enough to feel foolish for wasting. Daniel had always hated late fees. He would drive across town to save $5, then spend $12 on lunch because he was already out. That familiar contradiction gave Mara something more useful than grief. It made her angry enough to act.
I'm going today.
All right.
And you're coming with me.
I figured you were going to say that.
They drove separately. Ruth insisted on it, and Mara was relieved because 20 minutes in the same car would have required either conversation or forgiveness, and she was prepared for neither. The storage facility sat behind a tire shop and a discount furniture warehouse, the kind of place Mara had passed for years without once wondering who rented the rows of beige metal doors. Ruth was already standing beside her sedan when Mara pulled in. She wore a navy windbreaker and held the key between two fingers.
You kept the key.
I wasn't sure you'd remember to pick it up after accusing me of running a second marriage out of my purse.
I didn't say second marriage.
You didn't have to.
Mara looked away first. A delivery truck rattled past the entrance, carrying mattresses wrapped in plastic. Inside the office, a young manager asked for Daniel's name, then offered condolences with the practiced softness of someone who handled abandoned units more often than grieving spouses. Mara showed Daniel's death certificate and her identification. Ruth remained near the door, hands in her pockets, offering no help unless directly asked. The manager confirmed that Unit 318 had been rented in Daniel's name for years. Mara's stomach tightened before she asked the obvious question.
How many years?
The manager checked the screen, frowned at something, then scrolled. He said the current computer record went back 9 years, but the account appeared to have been transferred from an older system. There was no immediate start date on the screen.
9 years.
At least.
Mara turned toward her so quickly that Ruth raised both hands.
I heard him. I did not know that before this minute.
The manager glanced between them and decided the computer deserved his full attention. Mara paid for 1 additional week rather than a full month. It was enough time to remove the contents, not enough time to postpone the decision. The manager buzzed them through a gate and pointed toward the third row. Ruth walked on Mara's left, half a step behind.
Did he ever mention a number? 318?
Never before the note.
Did he ever ask you to store anything for him?
No.
Did he ask you to meet him here?
No.
Did he ever ask you not to tell me something?
Ruth stopped walking.
Not about this. Not about anything that belonged to your marriage.
That's a very specific answer.
Because you're asking me a very broad question.
Mara considered pushing harder. Then she saw 318 stenciled on a metal door 20 feet ahead. The unit looked smaller than Mara had imagined, which somehow made the secrecy feel more deliberate. Daniel had not hidden a warehouse. He had hidden a room barely wider than a walk-in closet. A round brass lock hung through the latch. Ruth held out the key.
You should open it.
Why?
Because he told me to give it to you.
Mara took the key. The plastic tag was warmer than she expected from Ruth's hand. She fitted it into the lock, but it caught halfway. She pulled it out, tried again, and felt irritation rise at the absurdity of struggling with a $4 piece of brass Daniel had somehow managed to keep secret for years.
Turn it left first.
Have you opened it before?
No. It's an old lock, Mara.
Mara turned the key left, then right. The lock opened. Neither woman reached for the door immediately. Mara listened to a cart rattling somewhere in the next row and a distant car alarm chirping twice. Ordinary sounds made the closed metal door seem even stranger.
If there's something in here you already know about, tell me now.
There isn't.
And if I find out that's not true?
Then you'll be angry at me for a reason instead of for practice.
Mara stared at her for a moment, then bent and lifted the metal door. The first thing she noticed was not furniture, clothing, or anything large enough to explain 9 years of rent. It was order. Metal shelves lined both walls. Cardboard boxes sat in straight rows with labels facing outward. Nothing appeared dumped, forgotten, or hurriedly hidden. Mara stepped inside far enough for the overhead bulb to catch the nearest labels. Each box carried a year in Daniel's handwriting. She saw last year first, then the year before that, then another and another running backward along the shelf. Mara moved deeper into the unit, following the dates until she reached a box on the bottom shelf. The year written on that one was more than a decade old.
Ruth.
Ruth came to the doorway, but did not step inside. Mara kept staring at the dated boxes, trying to understand why Daniel had preserved something so carefully for so long without ever bringing it home. Ruth stayed at the doorway while Mara crouched beside the oldest box. Daniel had written the year twice, once on the lid and once on the side facing the aisle.
He labeled everything like he expected someone else to go through it.
Or like he expected himself to forget where he put things.
Mara lifted the lid. There was no dramatic rush of hidden papers, jewelry, or cash. A pair of work gloves lay on top of a paperback home repair manual. Under those sat a boxed tape measure, a sealed birthday card, and a small framed photograph wrapped in an old dish towel.
This is what he paid to store?
Apparently.
Mara unwrapped the frame. It held a photograph of a brick house with a narrow porch, the kind of picture someone might print from a phone and put away without explanation.
Do you know this place?
No.
The birthday card was still sealed. Mara turned it over, but there was no name on the envelope. The next box held winter gloves, 2 hardback novels, a package of drill bits, and another unopened card. None of it matched the kind of secret Mara had prepared herself to discover.
Did Daniel collect gifts for people and forget to give them?
Not when I was married to him.
Mara glanced back at her, annoyed by how naturally Ruth could refer to a version of Daniel that existed before Mara knew him. She opened another box. This one contained a wool scarf, a boxed pocket knife, a coffee table book about regional architecture, and a photograph of the same brick house from a different angle.
The house again.
I see it.
There were no love letters tucked beneath the books, no perfume, no photographs of Daniel with someone Mara had never met. Just ordinary things arranged with extraordinary patience. After the 4th box, Mara began separating the contents into rough groups on the concrete floor. Tools, books, clothing, photographs, sealed envelopes.
You're inventorying it.
I spent 40 years keeping track of batteries, lenses, memory cards, contracts, and bridesmaids who wandered off before group pictures. I need categories.
Fine. Give me a category.
Mara handed her a stack of sealed cards. Ruth took them without comment and began arranging them by year on the shelf beside her. For nearly 20 minutes, the two women worked without discussing Daniel. The silence was easier when they had objects to move. The pattern changed halfway through the second shelf. Mara pulled out a rectangular parcel wrapped in brown paper, and this one had an address label. She saw the last name first. Ellis. Then her eyes moved back to the first name.
Evan.
Ruth stopped sorting cards. She did not ask which Evan.
This is for your son.
Daniel's son, too.
Mara knew that. She also knew Ruth had corrected her because the wording mattered.
Is this his house?
She held up the framed photograph they had found earlier. Ruth studied it for several seconds.
Yes.
You said you didn't know it.
I said I didn't recognize it. He painted the brick and replaced the porch railing. I haven't been there in years.
So Daniel was sending him things.
I didn't say that.
There's an address on the package.
There's no postage.
Mara looked at the upper right corner. Ruth was right. There was no stamp, no shipping label, no tracking sticker, nothing that suggested the parcel had ever been prepared to leave the building. They checked the next package. Evan's name again. No postage. Then another. And another.
How long has this been going on?
I don't know how long he's been buying these.
That's not what I asked.
Ruth lowered the card she was holding. When she answered, the irritation had gone out of her voice.
Evan hasn't spoken to Daniel in 11 years.
I know they weren't close.
No. Not close as Christmas cards and awkward phone calls. 11 years means 11 years.
Mara looked around the unit again. The boxes no longer seemed random. They seemed like a calendar built out of things that had never reached their destination. They worked backward through the years, and once they knew whose name to look for, it appeared everywhere. Evan was written on gift tags tucked under ribbons, on envelopes sealed but never stamped, and on 2 small shipping boxes with old addresses crossed out in Daniel's pen.
He knew where Evan lived.
Sometimes
What does that mean?
it means he would ask whether Evan had moved. I would answer if there was no reason not to.
You gave Daniel his address.
On occasion, yes.
But you never told me.
Why would I? I wasn't managing your marriage.
You were giving my husband information he wasn't sharing with me.
I was answering a father when he asked whether his adult son had changed addresses. That's all.
Mara wanted to argue, but another box had already given her something harder to explain. Inside was a new set of screwdrivers still wrapped in molded plastic. A sticky note on the back said, "For the house." Daniel had dated it 6 years earlier.
He was still trying.
He was still buying things.
Isn't that the same thing?
No.
Ruth picked up one of the sealed birthday cards but did not open it.
Buying something is easy. You can do it without hearing the other person answer. Repairing what made them stop answering is harder.
You make him sound like he didn't care.
I didn't say that either. People can care and still make a mess they don't know how to clean up.
Mara set the screwdrivers down harder than she meant to. The plastic package struck the concrete with a flat slap.
Then tell me what happened.
Not standing over a pile of birthday gifts like they're evidence for one side or the other.
You know why Evan stopped speaking to him.
Yes.
And I don't.
Ruth did not answer. That silence told Mara more about her marriage than any accusation could have. Near the back wall, behind 2 boxes of books, Mara found a gray file folder wedged flat beneath a shelf. Inside were printed hotel reservations, driving directions, and confirmation pages from an airline Daniel rarely used.
He told me he hated flying alone.
Several reservations had cancellation notices stapled behind them. The dates stretched across different years, each trip abandoned before it happened.
I didn't know about those.
Where was he going?
Mara laid the pages across an empty box lid. Most destinations meant nothing to her until Ruth pointed to one city and then to the old address on a parcel.
Evan lived near there then.
Another canceled reservation matched a later address. So did a motel receipt Daniel had printed but apparently never used.
He planned to go see him.
Looks like it.
More than once.
Planning isn't going.
Mara looked at the cancellation pages again. Each one represented a decision made twice. First to leave, then not to.
Did Evan tell him not to come?
I don't know what Daniel told himself before he canceled those trips.
You keep answering around things.
Because some of what you're asking belongs to Evan, not to me.
Mara almost asked whether anything about Daniel still belonged to her. Instead, she returned the canceled reservations to the folder. The afternoon light outside the unit had shifted. A stripe of sun that had been near the doorway now reached the opposite wall.
We should stop for today.
Not yet.
There was one narrow carton left on the lowest shelf, pushed behind a stack of outdated road atlases. Mara pulled it forward and found no year on the outside. Inside were 3 charging cables, a padded envelope, and a small digital voice recorder.
Was that his?
I've never seen it.
A strip of masking tape had been placed across the back. Daniel had written one name on it in black ink. Evan. Below the name was a date from 6 months before Daniel died.
He was still recording something for him this year.
Mara's thumb rested beside the play button, but she did not press it. Mara kept her thumb beside the play button until the screen dimmed. Ruth watched from the doorway without telling her what to do.
You know why he stopped talking to Daniel?
Yes.
Then tell me before I listen to something meant for Evan and make another mistake.
Ruth leaned against the metal frame of the unit and looked past Mara at the rows of unopened gifts.
It started with money, but if you call it a fight about money, you'll miss most of it.
Daniel told me Evan got angry because you needed help and Daniel couldn't give you what you wanted.
That's the version where Daniel sounds inconvenienced instead of responsible.
Mara flinched at the word responsible, not because it sounded impossible, but because Daniel had always used softer words when he described that year.
I had been out of work for months. My savings were nearly gone, and I was behind on the house and 2 medical bills. Evan was 37. He had his own mortgage and a job that paid fine, but not enough to rescue everybody without feeling it. Daniel told him not to worry. He said he would cover the past due mortgage amount and help me get through the next month.
He never told me that.
I figured he hadn't.
Mara set the recorder on an unopened box, as though placing it farther away might separate what Daniel had done from what Daniel had told her.
Did he give you the money?
Not when he said he would. He called Evan twice and promised the transfer was coming. Then he backed out.
Why?
Because the amount was more than he expected and because he had other plans for the money.
Mara knew before Ruth said anything else. That summer, she and Daniel had replaced the roof and put a deposit down on a long-planned trip.
The roof?
Partly.
I didn't know he had promised you anything.
I know you didn't. Evan knew, though. Daniel had made the promise directly to him.
Ruth explained that Evan had delayed paying one of his own bills because he believed Daniel's transfer was coming. By the time Daniel withdrew, Ruth had received a foreclosure warning.
Evan covered what he could, borrowed the rest, and spent 3 days on the phone untangling things I should have handled before they got that bad.
And that was enough for 11 years?
No, that was the week he finally got tired of the pattern.
Ruth described years of smaller promises Daniel made to Evan and then revised when keeping them became inconvenient. A weekend visit postponed, help with a car repair reduced after Evan had already approved the work. A graduation trip Daniel canceled days before departure.
None of those things alone ended anything. Evan kept adjusting. That was the problem. Daniel started assuming. He always would.
Mara looked at the shelves again. Every unopened box now seemed less like proof of persistence and more like evidence of how long Daniel had avoided the kind of answer he could not control. Ruth reached into the gray file folder and pulled out a folded bank statement Mara had overlooked beneath the canceled reservations.
He did send money later.
How much later?
Months.
The transfer covered a significant part of what Ruth owed Evan after the crisis. Daniel had written loan repayment in the memo line.
So he did make it right.
He paid money he should have paid earlier. That mattered. It didn't erase the part where Evan had to stand in my kitchen and tell me he couldn't cover everything after his father had already promised he would.
Ruth said Evan had been the one making calls, moving money, and explaining delays to people who did not care which family member had promised what.
He wasn't angry because Daniel failed to save me. He was angry because Daniel told him more than once that he would handle it and then left Evan holding the emergency.
What did Daniel say when Evan confronted him?
At first, that Evan was overreacting.
Mara closed her eyes for a second. She could hear Daniel saying it, not loudly, but with that impatient certainty he used when he thought emotion had become inefficient.
Later, he apologized for the money. Evan told him the money wasn't the whole thing.
And Daniel kept arguing about the amount.
For a while, yes.
That answer unsettled Mara more than if Ruth had described a single unforgivable act. There was no clean moment to isolate, only years of Daniel assuming there would always be another chance to explain himself better.
He told me Evan cut him off over an argument about helping you.
That wasn't completely false. It was just small enough to live with.
Mara picked up the recorder again. This time she held it with both hands.
If I listen, I'm crossing a line.
Yes.
You don't sound like you're going to stop me.
You're Daniel's widow. I'm not going to pretend I get to decide every boundary in this room, but whatever is on that recorder was labeled for Evan.
Mara pressed play.
Evan, I'm not recording this to tell you that you remembered it wrong. You didn't.
There was a pause on the recording, followed by the faint sound of Daniel clearing his throat.
I made promises I expected you to absorb when I changed them. I kept calling that flexibility because it sounded better than what it was.
Mara stopped the recorder before Daniel finished the next sentence.
That's enough?
Enough for me. The rest isn't mine.
They left the unit shortly before the facility office closed. Mara carried the recorder in a small paper bag, separate from the folder and separate from the gifts. In the parking lot, Ruth locked her car and then unlocked it again without opening the door.
Does Evan know Daniel died?
Yes. I told him.
Did he ask about the memorial?
No.
Did he say anything?
He said he was sorry I had to make the call.
Mara looked toward the storage buildings. She had spent 2 days interpreting Evan's absence as a gap someone should fill. Ruth's answer made it sound more like a boundary someone had maintained.
I need to tell him what's here.
You need to tell him enough to let him decide what happens to it.
That's what I mean.
Then don't tell him Daniel spent 11 years loving him from a storage locker. That's your interpretation, not information.
Mara bristled, then remembered the unopened parcels and the canceled flights. Ruth was not asking her to erase Daniel's effort. She was asking her not to decide what that effort meant for Evan.
Will you call him?
No. You found the unit. You're Daniel's wife. Ask the practical question yourself.
You really don't want to be in the middle.
I spent years in the middle. I know what it costs.
Ruth gave Mara Evan's current number, then drove away. Mara remained beside her car with the paper bag on the passenger seat and Evan's contact open on her phone. She typed 3 different messages and deleted all 3. Each one sounded too much like an invitation to feel something. Finally, she called.
Hello?
Evan, this is Mara Ellis.
There was a pause long enough for Mara to hear traffic on his end of the call.
I know who you are.
I found a storage unit Daniel kept. There are things in it with your name on them.
What kind of things?
Packages, birthday cards, tools, books, some photographs. A few personal items. I'm not calling to tell you what they mean. I need to know what you want me to do with them.
What are the choices?
I can destroy what should be destroyed, donate what can be donated, keep it temporarily, or let you look through it yourself.
Evan did not ask whether Daniel had written an apology. He did not ask whether Daniel had mentioned him at the end.
Don't throw anything out tonight.
I won't.
I'll call my mother first.
All right.
The call ended without condolences, accusations, or promises. Mara sat in her parked car afterward and realized she was relieved. Evan called the following morning. His voice sounded no warmer, but it sounded decided.
I talked to Mom.
Okay.
I'll come look at the unit.
You don't have to take anything.
I know, and I need you to understand something before I get there.
Go ahead.
Me walking into that room does not mean I changed my mind about my father. It doesn't mean his death made the last 11 years disappear.
I understand.
Do you?
Mara looked at Daniel's reading glasses still sitting on the kitchen counter, exactly where she had left them.
More than I did yesterday.
Evan was quiet for a moment.
I'll meet you there at 3.
Ruth arrived at the facility 10 minutes before Mara. Neither woman discussed the phone call beyond confirming that Evan was coming. Mara had returned the recorder to its carton and placed the gray folder back on the shelf. She had not listened to another second.
Did you tell him about the recording?
No, I told him there were personal items. He can decide what he wants to know when he gets here.
Good.
At 3 minutes past the hour, a dark pickup turned into the row and stopped 2 units away. Evan stepped out alone. At 48, he carried enough of Daniel around the eyes that Mara recognized him before Ruth lifted a hand. He hugged Ruth briefly, then turned to Mara. They had met only a few times before, all of them years earlier, and never under circumstances that required more than polite conversation.
Mara.
Thank you for coming.
I said I'd look.
Mara raised the metal door. Evan remained outside until it was fully open. His eyes moved over the shelves, the dated boxes, and the neat stacks Mara and Ruth had made. He said nothing at first. Then he noticed the birthday parcels. Some had his full name, others had only Evan, written in Daniel's familiar block letters. Evan stepped inside and picked up one package without opening it. He turned it over, saw there was no postage, and put it back.
How many years?
More than 10, from what we've found.
Evan looked at Ruth next. His expression did not ask whether Daniel had loved him. It asked for something narrower.
Why did he keep buying things after I told him to stop contacting me?
Ruth did not answer Evan immediately. She looked at the unopened packages, then at the key still hanging from the lock.
Because for a long time, he didn't understand that stopping contact also meant stopping the rehearsals.
What rehearsals?
Buying a birthday gift, booking a flight, writing a card, telling himself he'd send it when the words were right, then canceling the trip, leaving the package here, starting over the next year.
I told him not to send anything.
I know.
Did he?
Not at first.
Evan gave a short breath that was almost a laugh, except there was nothing amused in it.
That sounds like him.
A few months before he died, he called me and said he finally understood something.
Mara shifted her weight but stayed silent. Ruth was speaking to Evan now, not to her.
He said your silence wasn't a test. It wasn't you waiting for him to find the correct apology. He said it was a boundary, and he'd spent years treating it like an unfinished conversation he still had the right to restart.
So he understood after 11 years.
That's when he said it out loud.
Why give you the key?
Because he knew if something happened to him, Mara would find all this and think there'd been a relationship she didn't know about.
Mara looked down. That was exactly what she had thought before the first box was opened.
He didn't want her believing you two had been secretly talking. He didn't want me delivering any of this either.
Then what did he want?
He wanted you to be allowed to refuse it.
Evan's expression changed slightly, not toward forgiveness, but toward concentration.
He said nobody was to use his death, his health, these gifts, or any recording to make you feel guilty for staying away. And if you said no to all of it, nobody was allowed to call you ungrateful.
The unit was silent, except for the faint buzz of the overhead light.
I didn't know any of that when she brought me the key.
I figured.
I also listened to part of one recording before I called you.
How much?
Enough to hear him say you hadn't remembered things wrong. Then I stopped. I should have stopped before that.
But you did stop.
Mara nodded once. It was not forgiveness from Evan, and she did not treat it like one. Mara found the recorder where she had returned it to the carton and handed it to Evan without pressing anything.
Is there more than one file?
I don't know. I didn't check.
Evan looked at the small screen, scrolled once, and found the recording dated 6 months before Daniel's death.
You two don't have to stand here.
We'll be outside.
Mara and Ruth stepped into the aisle. The metal door remained open, but neither woman turned back toward the unit. They could not make out Daniel's words from where they stood. Mara was grateful for that. After less than a minute, the recording stopped. Evan called them back in. He was still holding the recorder, but his face had settled rather than softened.
He said he kept preparing to apologize because preparing felt safer than actually admitting what he'd done. He said the gifts became another way to postpone the part he couldn't control.
Do you want to hear the rest?
No.
Ruth nodded. She did not ask why.
You can erase the rest if you want.
I'll decide later.
Evan set the recorder back in the carton. Then he began looking through the practical items rather than the letters. He passed over unopened cards, a scarf, several books, and a boxed pocket knife. He stopped at a small socket set with a clearance sticker still on one corner.
When did he buy this?
The box was dated the year you bought the brick house.
Evan turned the set over in his hands. It was inexpensive, the kind of thing bought during a hardware store errand without ceremony.
He knew about the house.
He asked whether you'd moved. I told him you'd bought a place.
I'll take this.
Only that?
Mara heard the question after it left her mouth and stopped herself before adding anything else.
Only that.
All right.
Donate the tools, gloves, books, anything useful that's unopened or in good shape. I don't want the birthday packages delivered to me.
They won't be.
The letters and recordings are different. Mom can decide what she wants to keep, erase, or destroy.
I can do that.
Evan tucked the socket set under one arm. He did not touch the birthday gifts again.
I should go.
I'll call you later.
Okay.
At the doorway, Evan turned back toward Mara.
Thank you for asking what I wanted instead of deciding for me.
I almost did decide for you.
But you didn't.
Then he left with one small tool set and nothing else Daniel had prepared for him. Mara and Ruth spent the next afternoon clearing Unit 318. Without Evan there, the boxes returned to being objects that needed destinations. They filled donation cartons with unopened tools, winter gloves, books, and household items. Ruth kept the sealed letters and the recorder in one small box beside her purse.
Do you know what you'll do with those?
Not yet.
You don't owe me an answer.
That's new.
Mara laughed once, quietly. It was the first time either woman had laughed inside the unit.
I was fairly unpleasant when you brought me that key.
You were grieving and suspicious. Those are not the same thing as pleasant.
You could have been nicer.
I could have. I wasn't.
They did not apologize for every sharp sentence. They did not need to turn the week into a friendship ceremony. By late afternoon, the shelves were bare. Mara swept scraps of tape, torn cardboard, and dust into a small pile near the door.
You want the shelves?
Absolutely not.
They left the metal shelving for the facility to handle and carried the last donation box to Ruth's trunk. Before closing the unit, Mara stood inside alone for a moment and took out her phone. By habit, she framed the empty shelves, the concrete floor, and the rectangle of daylight at the entrance. She pressed the shutter once.
For the record,
Something like that.
Mara looked at the image for several seconds, then tapped delete.
changed your mind?
I spent most of my life making sure people had proof a day mattered. I don't think I need proof of this one.
Ruth did not answer. She simply waited while Mara stepped out and pulled the metal door down. At the office, Mara signed the closing paperwork while Ruth stood beside her with the box of letters at her feet. The manager asked for the key. Mara looked at Ruth, and Ruth held it out on her palm.
I think I've carried this long enough.
She placed the key on the counter. Neither woman asked to keep the faded tag marked 318. Outside, the afternoon was cooler than it had been when they first opened the unit. Their cars were parked in opposite rows.
Do you want coffee before you head home?
Not today. Maybe next week.
Maybe next week.
There was no hug. Ruth adjusted the box in her arms, and Mara held the office door while she walked through.
Evan took one cheap socket set and left years of unopened birthdays behind. That choice did not make Daniel's care meaningless, and it did not turn care into an excuse. Evan could recognize one useful thing his father had thought to buy without agreeing that the years of broken promises should be rewritten because Daniel eventually understood them better. The more difficult change belonged to Mara and Ruth. Mara stopped treating every stored object as evidence for the best possible version of her husband, and Ruth stopped carrying his unfinished attempt on his behalf. Leaving the key behind meant the living people no longer had to keep a room open simply because Daniel once believed he might someday be ready to knock on a door Evan had already closed.
Mara watched Ruth cross the parking lot, then headed toward her own car. For once, neither woman was walking ahead of the other with a key to something the other did not understand.